When Jesus arrived in Sychar, he was an unwelcome visitor. He was a Jew in Samaria. According to our narrative this morning, the Jews didn't associate with Samaritans, and neither did the Samaritans associate with the Jews. So Jesus was in unfriendly territory. Nevertheless, he decided that he would sit down and rest for a little bit by the town's well. He wasn't there for very long when a woman from the town, a Samaritan woman, came to the well to draw water. And since Jesus was thirsty, he asked her for a drink. The woman did not respond to him like we might expect. She didn't offer him the water that he asked for. She didn't respond with hospitality like was the practice of her culture. But instead, she immediately reminded Jesus about a conflict that had existed for centuries between his people and her people. "You are a Jew," she said, "and I am a Samaritan. So how can you ask me for a drink?" Lingering conflict is a terrible thing, and we know this. And yet we as individuals and as nations, we get stuck in our history of hostility. We're unwilling to forgive, so hatred continues to poison our thoughts and our opinions about other people year after year and decade after long and very painful decade. We are masters, church. We are masters of animosity and of holding a grudge. We fight when we should be reconciled, and we retaliate when we should seek peace. There is a man in the Middle East who can't leave his home without being attacked by a flock of crows. You heard me correctly. There is a man who lives currently in the Middle East, and he cannot leave his home without being attacked by a flock of crows. I heard this just this week on the news. It's a big story. Apparently every time this poor guy walks out of the door, these birds come swooping in with obvious malicious intent. He thinks he knows why. He told a reporter that very recently he tried to save a baby crow that got hung up in some rope, but his rescue attempts failed. Despite his effort, the little bird died. And ever since then, he has been under siege by the rest of the flock. Sounds absurd, right? But, in fact, animal behavioralists have confirmed that crows will take revenge on their enemies. And they see this man as an enemy. They mistook his action. He was trying to save the bird, but they thought he was trying to kill the bird. And so now they are exacting their revenge on him. Instead of forgiving his ability to save the fledgling, instead of being reconciled with their loss, they are acting out of their fear, with suspicion and distrust and hostility. And you know what? Human beings do the exact same thing, don't we? The animosity that existed between the Jews and the Samaritans in the past is really no different from the current animosity that exists today between Christians and Muslims. In general, American Christians hate every Muslim because of what one militant sect of Islam has done. The rest of the Islamic community is just as appalled by those atrocities as we are. And yet the majority of Christian Americans refuse to acknowledge that. So instead of trying to understand each other, instead of trying to enter into meaningful conversation and honest relationship, we respond out of our fear, with suspicion and distrust and hostility. The woman in our text this morning, the woman at the well, she was a Samaritan and Jesus was a Jew. Their people had a very long history of hating each other. So how could he ask her for a drink of water? How dare he ask her for a drink of water? She would not offer him so much as a single sip. And in return for her animosity, in return for her not offering Jesus anything, Jesus offered to her eternal living water. Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, he told her, indicating the water in the well. But whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst. Now, if we could read this text in the Greek, I think that we all need to sign up for a Greek class so that we can read our New Testament in the original language. If we could read this text in the Greek, we would hear Jesus say, "Whoever drinks the water I give will not be thirsty forever." This is water that permeates the soul, and it wells up, it gurgles up like a spring that is spilling over to eternal life, which is that full and that abundant life that is lived continually in the presence of God. Whoever drinks the water I give will not be thirsty forever, Jesus told the woman. And the woman responded as we might also respond to such a miraculous drink. She said, "Sir, give me this water." Does that sound, I wonder, does that sound at all familiar to you this morning? Does it remind you of the story that we read last week? Remember? Jesus offered the crowd bread from heaven, the kind of bread that fills your life and fills your soul, and the crowd said to Jesus, "Sir, always give us that bread." Remember? And now Jesus tells this woman at the well, this Samaritan woman, this woman who can only see him as an enemy. Jesus tells her that he has water to satisfy her forever. And she pleads with him, "Sir, give me this water." She says, "Give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming to this well." She doesn't quite get it, does she? She's not quite catching on. She still can't wrap her mind around anything but her current need, her earthly need. And indeed, water is crucial for life. We can't go for 3, maybe 4 days without it. Jim said 72 hours. That's why the money you're raising for the catchment systems in Haiti is so important. Imagine how it will change the lives of people who have a water source right there at their home. But even so, so, they will have to drink that water again and again, won't they? They'll have to return to that rain barrel day after day to slake their thirst and to save their bodies from dehydration and from death. And the woman in our text will have to continue to go to the well on a daily basis to get the water that her body requires. And that's what's on her mind. That's all that's on her mind. She doesn't comprehend what Jesus is offering to her, what he is trying to teach her. She doesn't comprehend what he's leading her towards. She just can't wrap her mind around the type of water that will satisfy her thirst forever. The author Richard Rohr says that this water Jesus offers to the woman, this water that wells up in us and forever satisfies us. This water is none other than God's love, a gift that cannot be exhausted, Rohr says. It never runs out. And as we drink from this well of forever nourishment, we are replenished in all that we do, and in the way that we live, and in the way that we communicate and harmonize and interact with the world around us. It is God's love, after all, that gives birth to heaven's kingdom on earth, a dominion where true peace is always the constant, and where forgiveness is the key that opens every door. It's God's love that fills our life with the spiritual abundance that we seek after and that we strive for. It's God's love that satiates the deepest thirst within us, the thirst for meaning, thirst for acceptance, a thirst for grace, because it is God's love that tears down walls and builds bridges and finally makes my enemy my friend. And that is the gift of truly abundant life. And this is the cup that Christ offers to the world, Christ of God's life-saving, world-saving love. You know, when I consider this truth, I have to consider where and when I have failed to drink from this eternal spring of love. Jesus told the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, this woman who would only consider him as an enemy. Jesus told her he had water to satisfy her deepest thirst forever. And as I consider what he offered to her, I have to consider when and where I have withheld this spring of love from other people. When have I heard Christ ask me through my enemy for a cup of water from God's loving cistern, and I have refused to dip into that well? When have I rejected a cup offered to me in grace and in forgiveness from my so-called enemy? When have I poured out and wasted the satisfying water of abundant life, a life lived in the love of God? And when have I, through Christ in me, held up that cup so that others could drink?